Thanks, George. And welcome to this NYSAIS-Now session on Trustee Governance 101. I always like to start these sessions by just, first of all, thanking you for being trustees or being interested in governance and the work that you do as trustees or in the governance area is incredibly important. It's really the foundational work to help your school be successful. So I do want to thank you. I think what I'd like to do, this is a small session, a small group session. So what I'd like to do is go quickly around the room, if you will, and just have you just introduce yourself to each other so everybody knows who's in the session. So what we'd like to just know is your name, the name of your school, which is, we already see that, which is fine. And then how long you've been a trustee. So we'll just do those three basic things. So I'm going to work from my screen. I'm seeing you on a gallery view like George mentioned. So I'm going to start with Tanya, who's in my upper left-hand corner. So Tanya, go ahead.
Hi, Tanya Manwali. I am on the Loyola School Board. My daughter attends the school. I also attended the school. I am on the board for 1 year. I was previously on another NYSAIS board, Buckley Country Day School out in Long Island.
Great. And thank you for adding that. So if you could just tell us your relationship to the board. So if you're a parent trustee, an alum trustee, or whatever. Thank you, Tanya. Very, very nice to meet you. Let's go to Michelle.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelle DeFries. I've been on the board at the Storm King School since 2012. I was asked to serve on it when I was a parent of a child there who is now graduated from Storm King as well as Rhodes College. And I'm a real cheerleader for Storm King.
Great. As every trustee should be, right, Michelle?
Yeah.
Elizabeth over Trevor.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth. I am not on the board at Trevor Day School, but I am on the administration. I'm Director of Development, and I work very closely with a couple of board committees, one of which is responsible for identifying good board candidates. So I thought that today's workshop would be helpful for me to learn more about the roles and expectations of board service.
And that committee is a very crucial committee to the board. So welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Victoria. Your microphone's in the lower left-hand corner. Just unmute yourself.
There you go. Sorry. My name is Victoria Petro-Conroy. I'm with the Co-op School. I have 2 children there, and I've been on the board for 2 years.
Great. Welcome, Victoria.
Thank you.
Ia, am I saying that correctly?
Yes, you are. Yeah.
Hi. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Ia Andrews, and I am on the board of St. Anne's. I've been on the board since just this past spring, and I am a former teacher and a current parent.
Great, great. And Risa, do I have it right?
Yes, Risa, hi. I'm on the board at the Bread of Shalom School. It's my 5th year, and I'm the vice chair of the board, and I head up the directors of nomination.
Excellent, excellent. And then it looks like Stephanie, it looks like over at Woodland Hill, we have a couple of you there. So introduce both of yourselves.
Hi, I'm Stephanie, and I'm a teacher here at Woodland Hill. And this is my first year on the board, and I'm also a parent here.
Great, okay.
I'm Kate Singh. I'm president of the Board of Trustees. I've been a member of the Board of Trustees for 5 years, 3 of which and 2 as trustee, and I'm just accompanying our trustees for support.
Okay, great. And your microphone's a little soft, so you two will have to speak up so we can hear you a little bit. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Brad over at Eastwoods.
Yes, hi. My name is Brad Ketcher. I was just added to the Board of Trustees for Eastwoods last month. Basically, I'm just a very involved parent, and for that, I guess I was rewarded to being part of the board and also just very active.
That is the way many board members become board members. Welcome, Brad. Burke, I'm sure I'm butchering your name there.
It's no problem at all. My name is Burcu Mirza. I'm a new trustee at Trevor Day School. I just joined this July. I have 2 children, 7th grade and 9th grade, and I work closely with Elizabeth on a few committees together.
Oh, great, great. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Guha? Did I butcher that one also?
No, you got it right, actually. Did a good job.
Good.
Guha Bala. I just joined Woodland Hill Montessori School on the Board of Trustees. I have 3 kids, three girls in the school, one in 8th grade and two in 1st grade. Been there for a while, since my older one joined in the nursery program there.
Great, well, welcome. And Julie.
Hi there. My name is Julie Kwan. I'm a parent trustee at Berkeley Carroll in Brooklyn. I didn't turn on my video because I'm holding my newborn.
But we like to see newborns. That's okay.
And yeah, I've been on the board since just a couple months, so wanted to learn more about what.
Great. Well, welcome, Julie. And one of the reasons we use this platform, the Zoom platform, and you might think about this as board members, is you can see that we have representation from virtually the entire state. Woodland Hill up in the Capital Region, Storm King in the Hudson Valley, New York City. Where else do we have here? New York City. Then we have out on Long Island. And so we've got a good representation of schools. And this type of communication really helps. And I'll talk about that a little bit in a few minutes. So I want to just start. I'm going to do a combination of having whole group discussion, and then I'll also share a PowerPoint with you so you can watch that also. And we'll spend a little bit of time flipping back and forth. So it might get a little clunky at times. I apologize, but let's go ahead and give this a shot. So you should see NYSAIS, I assume you do. Now, what this does is once we go into this mode, you should see us in some type of thumbnail, probably on the right-hand side of your screen. And if you look at the bottom, you probably see 5 or 6 images, and you can scroll through those images if you want to do that, to see other people within the group. So, for the Woodland Hill people, there's a picture. I think that's a picture of your school, I believe. That's Woodland Hill right there up in the Capital Region. So I always like to start my workshops with this quote, and this quote is from Peter Drucker. And Peter did a lot of work, he's passed away, but did a lot of work in the for-profit world. But he also did a tremendous amount of work in the not-for-profit. So I'd like you just to look at this and read through it. And it really identifies what being on a board is all about. As George mentioned, I serve on several boards. I'm actually currently on 6 different boards, and I have been on many boards in the past. And I really do believe that governance work is one of the most critical functions for an organization, and good governance is really critical. So it's never about power, and when we come onto boards, hopefully none of us ever come on thinking we have lots of power, or we have one issue that we want to just put that through, but we recognize that we have responsibility. And the responsibility is to the organization, the board, the staff, but really it is fidelity to the mission of the school. So I've set up several goals for us for today. The first goal is I do want to talk about the roles and responsibilities of trustees in a nonprofit organization. So what do you do as trustees? We're going to spend a fair amount of time talking about how do we take the strategic view with this. And then we'll talk about, trustees often ask me, well, how do I know what's going on? What should I be paying attention to? So we'll talk a little bit about how you go about measuring the health of your school, and almost as important is measuring the health of your board. And then we'll talk about what resources exist for you as trustees. So I'm going to start with that the strategic view for a school, which is really the critical element of being a trustee, starts with the trustees. So as if a school is really strategically thinking, it's because they've got a board that does that. One of the things we know is that successful school governance and successful school leadership, it doesn't happen by accident. It really is the result of something very purposeful. And we at NYSAIS, we accredit about 190 schools in our organization. And I can tell you that we know that when a school is going well, the board is running well, the management team is running well, the school's in really great shape. When the school begins to go off the rails, it's often because something has happened in the governance side, or something's happened in the management side, or something's happened with the two sides of the organization. The good news about all this is that we really do know some of the best practices that are available. This is something in the United States we have, here in NYSAIS, we have 2 schools that are over 300 years old. And so governance is not new. The idea of governance of non-public schools is not new. And so I want to just bring these 4 books to your attention. One is the Trustee Handbook, the upper right-hand corner, that's put out by NYSAIS. How many of you have that book and have read or have copied them? I see you have, Michelle, and Tanya, you have. So several of you have that book. If you don't have, I highly recommend it. The second one is over on the left-hand side, which is Governance as Leadership, and that's put out by Harvard, I believe, and it's Dick Chait's work. How many of you serve on other boards beyond the board, your school board? How many of you do serve on that? So Ia does, up in Woodland Hills do, a couple of you. So this is, I think, a really great book. We're going to spend quite a bit of time using some of the principles in this book, the Governance as Leadership, Reframing the Work of Nonprofit Boards. I highly recommend this one to you as reading. The one on the lower left-hand side is the Nonprofit Answer book. It's put out by BoardSource. And this is a really practical guide. And it really helps you. It's basically done in a Q&A format. And it's really wonderful to, if you think about how should we do this or how should we do that, this book will help you with that. If you don't have that, particularly if you're a board chair or you're in some type of leadership position on the board, I would get this book. And then the one that's just a kind of a fun favorite for me is on the right-hand side, which is the 5 life stages of nonprofits, from the time a small nonprofit starts to all the way to a very mature organization. And what are those stages that an organization goes through? I put in the bottom of the slide a quote. This is from, Professor James Honan is at Harvard University, and he is actually the current chair of the ERB board. I work with him on the ERB board. And Jim teaches governance also. And one of the things that Jim said in a meeting that I was at, and I really thought was just very sage, is that organizations rarely outperform their board of trustees. So again, you as a trustee are a critical element to the success of your school. So I'm going to give you our definition of governance. So I'd like you to spend just a moment and read this. This is the NYSAIS definition of governance. Just look through this, please, and read it, because I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about this. So what were some of the key, we'll see who has also good memories. What were some of the key elements of that definition of good governance?
Driven by the mission.
Driven by the mission. Okay, what else?
There's a clear fiduciary role.
Clear fiduciary role. Exactly. What else?
Leaves the day-to-day business to the head of school.
Leaves the day-to-day operations to the management team, the head of school and the entire management team. Right, exactly. What else? Elizabeth? All right, go on.
Go ahead, Elizabeth, please.
No, go ahead. It's okay.
Is it clear roles and responsibilities on the board with a structured deliberative process for making decisions?
And that's what I want us to spend just a couple of minutes thinking about, which is the board is a deliberative body. The reason that you were selected to be board members is because you bring something good and interesting to the table, to the governance table. And the idea of deliberation as a group is critical in effective boards. So think of yourselves as a group of people who come into a board meeting, but the idea of deliberation is really the key to good governance. And so the deliberative body is something that I don't want you to overlook. So that is the way we define it. And I'm going to come back. Let me go back to share, sorry. Okay, that was our definition. So I'm going to show you some of the resources that NYSAIS provides for you. One is our manual for accreditation, and this actually should be 4.1 now. We've just adopted a new version, 4.1. And basically, governance is one of the key components of our manual. There are basically 5 baseline, and a baseline criteria in governance for us is something that's a yes or no. You either do it or you don't. And for NYSAIS for accreditation, you have to do it. So the baselines are critical pieces. The 14 strategic ones are basically done on a 1 to 6 scale. You'll see them in just a minute. And that's where you have some type of scale, and knowing that no school has all 6s and no school has all 1s. The other area that we provide guidance is to our principles of best practice for governance. So I'm going to just highlight a few of the key governance criteria. We'll spend some time talking about them. The first one, the ones I'm doing in red, those are the ones I want to spend a little bit of time on so you can see them. The first one is the audit. So this goes to the fiduciary piece, that you do have an outside audit. The group that's responsible for making sure that the audit happens is the Board of Trustees. The law in the state of New York is that you have to have an annual audit as a nonprofit organization above a certain dollar amount. All of our schools qualify for that. They're above that. The piece that NYSAIS adds is what we would call the management letter. So the management letter is not the engagement letter, but it is the letter that the auditors do showing you as a board that they have done internal controls. They've looked at the internal controls of the organization. So that's really critical. The next one is 3.2. You can just see it apply to laws. 3.3 baseline is there's a conflict of interest. Hopefully all of you already signed that. 3.4, the governing body keeps full and accurate records of its meetings, committees, and policies. Now, why did I highlight that one? I do want to spend just a moment on that. Why would you think I wanted to talk about that?
Well, I mean, it's very important to make sure that the goals are accurately laid out and being followed, and to evaluate, one, on a look back period, and two, just to ensure to auditors and internally that you are actually having and engaging in conversations, and also helps you protect yourself on a legal basis.
And so on the look back, you mentioned look backing from the point of view of right now, right? Is that right, Brad?
That's correct.
But who else is the constituency for the board? Thinking the big picture now. Would the answer be probably future boards? So it's a look back also. So keeping in mind that you are the keepers of the records, and so future boards, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, may want to know. You can hear the siren in the background. I apologize, I'm in New York City. So the keeping records is not just for you and not just for your look back, but it's for future look backs. So B 3.5 is a confidentiality of all conversations. Did you want to add something there? No.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have a lot of background noise now here. But I did have a question on the record keeping there, full and accurate record. So, you know, certainly in terms of minutes of decision making,
yes,
we discussed basis for decisions, and things like that make a lot of sense to record. But you know, at least on the boards that I serve on, we're very careful not to take note for note comments.
That's correct.
Things that are discussed, because it prevents open debate, and sometimes debate on contentious things. Whereas when you have review of these things, and people often hold back because, you know, what they say will be written down on a piece of paper, and there's not an honest conversation that's happening in the room as a result. So
that's a really good
decision-making context, but other things that really ought not to be written down.
That's correct. That's a good distinction. So you want the larger picture of what the decisions were, what the issues maybe that were framed the decision. Certainly not this person said, this person said. You do not want a transcript or anything like that. So, but you do want to have enough information in there that people in the future can understand maybe these were the issues that we resolved, or these are the issues that we looked at these 5 points, these are the pros, these were the cons, something along those lines. But not attributing to individual people. This is not a transcript. Number B 3.5 is the ensures the confidentiality. Now, why would I again highlight, that's a baseline criteria. Why would that be such an important criteria for a board of trustees?
I think a board needs to be viewed as coming, even though we might disagree, we come out of the meeting in one voice.
And why would it be important to have that sense that we can have this conversation in this meeting, in this board meeting, but it is going to be not talked about in the parking lot? Why is that important?
Well, the board discusses such highly sensitive matters like the financials of the school. You don't want to divulge any of that to someone else and then create panic among the community if the forecast isn't looking good, for example.
Right. Well, and also beyond, and that's exactly right, Elizabeth, but and also beyond that is you want to be able to have a full vetting of all topics. So you're going to want to hear lots of different points of views, and sometimes a point of view taken out of context can be totally misunderstood. And so if it's taken out of context and it's like you tossed out a crazy idea because you wanted to get it on the table, you wanted it to be vetted, but knowing that this is maybe an idea that's not going to go anywhere, but you just wanted it to be out there, that's okay within the context of the meeting. But if it goes outside of the meeting, then it sounds crazy, and eventually people would say, I don't want to talk anymore in this board meeting because I'm afraid of things going outside of the board meeting. And I can tell you a story that I know of a board that is exactly what happened. The board, somebody in the board was telling stories outside of the board. The next day in the parking lot, it was what happened at the board meeting, to the point where eventually the board stopped talking to each other because they didn't want their names associated. So what you were saying with the minutes, they didn't want their names associated outside, and they got to the point where they didn't trust each other. And then the trust broke down. When they hit rock bottom as a board, they actually split into two camps. One camp held one board meeting, one camp held the other board meeting. There are two separate board meetings. So you talk about a very dysfunctional board, and the way that played out was enrollment went down, annual giving went down, admissions went down, and the school, once they figured it out, they closed the confidentiality gap, but it took the school almost 5 years to recover from that. So if you go away with nothing else from this afternoon's discussion, this idea of confidentiality at the board level is a critical piece to really great board strategic discussions. The idea, somebody mentioned this earlier, this is in our definition, roles and responsibilities. This is really important. It's not only that it's clear and it's not only transparent, but it should be communicated. So if you talk to people within your community, do they know what the board does? Do they know what the management team does? And do they know the difference between management and governance? Decisions are communicated. Governing body recognizes a responsibility as stewards of the mission. There is no other group that has the stewardship of the mission other than the board. That is your responsibility, even though management and the head of school live the mission, believe in the mission, your responsibility, you are stewards of the mission. The strategic planning comes with you. I do want to talk about 3.5, which is stability and transitions. In this criteria, the old NYSAIS criteria years ago was transitions in the leadership of the head of school. And we recognize that that is only half the equation. The other half of the equation is transitions in the leadership of the board. So it is always important as you're thinking through the board, who are you bringing onto the board and who are good potential future board members as well as future leaders on the board. That should be a criteria. We often have a grid in the governance committee of we want this type of person or this type of person on the board, this type of skill set, this type of diversity. We also should think about we need certain leadership characteristics. So that's something we suggest that you not forget about. 3.6, appropriate compensation, support, and evaluation, important. Financial resources are provided for the school. That is your responsibility as a board, as well as this next one, which is the operating budget. So the key piece for this one on a strategic 3.8 is that you not only have an annual operating budget, but you also have a multi-year financial plan. And that is not just the responsibility of the governance committee, that is the responsibility of the entire board. Some board members think, well, the finance committee takes care of that. Yes, they should drill down. The drill down should happen in the finance committee, but the questions should happen with the entire board. Institutional advancement, which is the development work. The board does establish the broad policies, and you do delegate the operations to the management team. You really need to focus on strategic interests of the school. That is your responsibility. And that you as a board go through your own professional development. So doing a session like this is important to help you understand about governance, but you as trustees should always be thinking about how can I become a better trustee? How can I become a better board member? The idea on strategic 3.13 of diversity, gender, multiculturalism, those should play into your decisions as you look at the complexity of your school. And then the last one, which is 3.14, is do you have adequate insurances? Do you have adequate risk transfer? So there are some schools that they think, oh, somebody's taking care of that. That is a board responsibility to be asking at the finance meeting, what are our insurances? and there's a summary sheet that your insurance carrier should provide for you. I recommend highly that that become an agenda item once a year on your finance committee. So what should you know about as new trustees? You should know the history of the school. You should know the recent history of the board. You should understand the committee structure. You should look at what is the governance structure and what is this relationship that the governance has with the management and the staff. And then how does the board communicate with the administration? Is it through the board chair? Is it through the governance committee? Is it through the executive committee? How does that work? Again, all of you should know that, and all of you should be able to explain it to members of your community. The documents that you should have as a new trustee are the bylaws. That's the key document for you, so you should all have a copy of those. The mission statement, you should know the mission. We'll talk about that in a minute. The budgets, again, as new trustees, you should go through the budgets. The board and the committee minutes, you should have at least looked at the last couple of years. The audit, what are the trends? And again, when you're looking at audits, the place I always recommend is not just at the numbers, but look at the notes. The notes at the back of the audit are really an important part of the audit. We often think, oh, those numbers, that's all we need to pay attention to. Look at the notes. The conflict of interest form and the short and long range plan. So a practical suggestion I'm going to offer to you here is that the board should use something like Dropbox or Google Docs. NYSAIS, just so you know, we are a nonprofit also. We have a board of trustees also. We use Dropbox to store all of our board documents, and then board members have access to those documents. So a practical way to do that is use some type of, we use the professional version, we use a secure version. You do want to make sure that you have security, but that you use some way that they can get access to the documents. So everything should start with the mission. So can somebody tell me why? I've said that, and we all think that, but why is that the case? Why should everything start with the mission of your school?
Foundation of where you have been, where you are, where you're going, and I mean we've just reaffirmed ours, and
Okay, where it is, where you are, and where you're going. What else? Brad, you're muted. Lower left-hand corner.
I apologize. Yeah, I mean, it's our the mission is exactly as it states, right? It's why we're doing exactly what we're doing, why we want to deliver the best and the excellence for our school. I mean, each one of us on this call right now thinks our school is excellent, has something to offer to the community, and gives us pride internally through our kids, and at the same time trying to share it through future families and future generations.
And I would add one other piece to that, which you're exactly right, Brad. I would also add the piece of mission creep. So mission creep is, it's easy to begin to expand, oh, this is a good idea, this is a good idea, this is a good idea. And eventually the organization has gotten so diffused that you really don't, you've lost sight of your mission. So it's really important that you know what the mission is, that you be faithful to the mission. If it looks like the school and the board wants to go in a larger direction or a different direction, then we always recommend revisit the mission. You can modify missions. Missions are not etched in stone, but you should be faithful to the mission that you have in place at this point in time. See if I can get this again. Hold on. Sorry. I do apologize. So the practical suggestion I do want to offer you here is that we recommend that you put your mission statement right on your board agendas. That it should all be on every board agenda, that you're looking at that. So as a trustee, always ask yourself, what do I really know about the mission? Could you tell people the mission of your school? So I'm going to mention 3 duties that trustees have. And this does come from the work of Dick Chait, that book I mentioned at the very beginning, the duty of care, the duty of loyalty, and I really just like this last term. It's a duty of obedience. I always think I'm like training a dog or something, but you'll get it when I fill this in. So the duty of care, this is where you as a board member, you actively participate in decisions, and you're using, the key is your own best judgment. So there's sometimes when we're in a group that think, oh, well, everybody else has got it, I've got to go with the group. Use your judgment. That is why you are there as a board member. The duty of loyalty is that you need to set aside your own personal and professional interests, and that the organizational needs always come first. This is really important with parent trustees. This is where it's hard. I have been a parent trustee. I've been a chair on a school board where my children went to school, and I realized how hard that is in board meetings to step away from that parent. But when you come into a board meeting, you are a trustee first, you are a parent second in that meeting, in that context. Then the duty of obedience is where you really are making sure that you've fulfilled all your legal responsibilities, that you are making sure the school is following the laws and it is true to its mission. So I'm going to give you 3 things that you really should focus in on. One is the fiduciary. We mentioned that at the very beginning of this. The second is the generative, and the third is the strategic mode. So fiduciary, if you do nothing else as a board member, this is what you must do. This is where you are faithful to the mission, you're accountable for performance, and you comply with laws and regulations. That is the foundational work that you do as a board. If you did that, if I was going to give you a grade as a board, I'd give you a C, because that is average, that's good, that's what you should do. The reality is, though, the reason you've been added to the board is for these next 2, which is the generative work and the strategic work. That is where, in my mind, and being on the boards that I'm on, this is the part I like the most. So we'll start with the generative. So the generative is really what we talk about, which is this partnership between the board and the head of school and the key administrative staff. And this is where you help the board, the other board members, and the administrative staff to frame issues. You know, we never get perfect information. So we're making decisions, and we might have survey on this, or we might have heard this, or we've seen this, but we don't have all the pieces all the time, and we rarely have perfect information to make perfect decisions. We're going to see ambiguous situations. So this is where you use your best judgment in helping understand this, helping make sense of this, asking the right questions, putting out, what about this, what about that? And this is the generative work that really is where you add significant value to the board, your ability to do this generative work. And I really think that the best board members are the ones that can ask us great questions. They're questions that are not just meant to be gotcha questions. They're questions that are meant to advance the question, advance the discussion, help people understand all the nuances of what we're trying to decide as a board. So once you've done that, you've made sense of the ambiguous situations, this is where you go into the strategic mode, and this is where you've organized your priorities. We now understand the situations, we understand where we're going, we want to now move forward, we're going to deploy resources in a prioritized way, and strategic thinking helps us not just stay the course, but we're setting the course. And so that's a really critical piece. And a practical suggestion I'm going to give you here is that this should actually be an agenda item. So there should be, the board agenda might be divided up into the consent areas, which is the routine, fiduciary, and then the other part of the agenda might be the generative and strategic conversations. And so by putting it there, it helps everybody think, I need to be generative, I want to be strategic. So let me give you some principles of best practice for trustees. When I look at great boards, these are the things we would see. First of all, you learn to separate the interests of the school from a particular constituency. You don't represent the third grade parents, you don't represent the alums, or you don't represent your child or a group of children. That's a really hard lift, but it's an important one. That you accept and support all board decisions. Now, when I say that you accept and support all decisions, What does that mean about the conversation at the board meetings?
Well, once something's been decided, agreed, voted on, you have to operate based on that, and not sort of keep going back to things or coming from a different angle, because if there's a consensus, then that's the direction forward.
Confidentiality is very important.
And does it mean that the board is monolithic and
No.
that you all have to agree when you're in that generative conversation?
No.
I think disagreements is actually a good thing, because
Yeah,
then now you get both sides, and then you pick what you collectively might be the right path. Might be.
Exactly. So the idea of disagreement or multiple points of view is what I prefer to say, that we've got multiple ways to look at this. Let's look at it this way, this way. I'm hoping one of the things you get out of this session is that we encourage that. But we also recognize that once the decision is made, everybody's on board with that decision, and we refrain from throwing other board members under the bus or saying, well, it wasn't my idea, somebody else's idea. We don't go there. Good board members never go there. You don't become involved in specific management issues or personnel issues or curricular issues. That is not your area as a board. So that is left to your management team, to your head of school and the management team. We've already talked about confidentiality. Your deliberations are confidential. The other principle is that you as a board are regularly assessing your effectiveness as a governing body. You also show the support of the head of school in the community. You're constantly doing that in a public venue. That's really important to helping everybody recognize that the board and the management team are working together. This is a hard one sometimes, is the authority rests with the entire board and not individual board members. So where this really plays out, particularly for parent board members, is your child's in somebody else's, is in a teacher's class, you go in for a parent conference, and the parent and the teacher says, oh my gosh, I've got a board member, I've got to look at the board member, and you need to help them be at ease. That you need to say, I'm coming in as a parent, I'm not a trustee when I'm meeting with you as a parent. That your only authority as a board member is when you come together in a meeting and you work as the board. When you go outside of the board meeting is not convened any longer, then you just go back to your day jobs and your day roles, the different hats. And that's really important to help the staff know that, other parents know that, alumni to know that. That's really a critical piece to educate your friends, the people in your spheres about this. And that you as a board member actively participate in the development efforts of the school. So you're always helping, you either are raising funds, your own funds, or helping raise other funds and resources that you bring to the table. I'm going to talk real quickly about board committees. I really am a fan and the boards of board committees. The boards that I think are the most effective really use committee work really well. This is where the conversations really should take place, is in the committee level, not the board as a whole. The board as a whole should be asking the really smart questions, and if they don't get the right answers or they don't get all the answers, then it should go back into the committee. So committee work really helps share responsibility. Really important part, why that's one of the reasons we have committees. Committee work increases overall participation. Many good boards have non-board members on some committees. There's nothing wrong with that. That's actually a good idea, because it also allows you to look for future board members. How did they work on the board committee? Were they a good member of the board committee? Obviously, they wouldn't be in the executive committee. They might not be on the finance committee, perhaps, but they would be in all the other board committees. It allows people on the board to use some of their skills. They might have a finance background, or they might have a legal background, or they might have an organizational background, or a construction background, or architecture, or whatever. So committees are really important to let people on the board use some of their skills. And it really does, if you do this properly, frees up the board meetings for generative and strategic conversations, which is really the way the board should be running. I'm going to offer a practical suggestion here, which is video conferencing. NYSAIS is a huge fan of video conferencing, like what we're doing now for committee work. I can tell you that the NYSAIS board committees, the finance committee, the executive committee, the membership committee, in the last 10 years has never met in person. They've always met through video conferencing. And we will find that that has increased. We have a board that stretches from Buffalo to New York City and everything in between. So this allows every board member to be actively involved in the work of the board on the committee level. The board meetings are always in person, but the committee meetings are done through some type of video conferencing. Highly recommend this as a platform. It's a great platform. So what are some indicators of effective governance? One is that this is sometimes a hard thing for boards to think about is you only have one employee. That's it. You don't have 70 employees or 100 employees or 10 employees. You have one, and that is the head of school. Your head of school has responsibility for implementing your board policies. They have complete authority over the faculty, the selection, the evaluation and dismissal of faculty. That's not your role as board members. They are responsible for keeping you informed. What I always tell boards is that the goal should be no surprises on either end. The board should not surprise the head should not surprise the board. This has become really hard in 2018 because of all the access to information. So something can happen in a fourth grade classroom that is sent out by some student's phone or text or something, and information gets out of the classroom or out of the school before even the head might know, but the board might find out about it even before the head. So this is a hard thing now in 2018. So something to think about, cut each other a little bit of slack here, but the general principle still applies. No surprises from the board to the head to the board. And then your head is responsible for working in developing and monitoring the school's resources. So your resources are really basically your fiscal resources, your personnel resources, your physical plant resources. Those are all resources that you have that you're using to advance the educational mission of your school. You all should work as a group to make sure that you are using the resources in the most productive way possible. So let's talk a little bit about assessing the board. So we're going to assess the school first, and then we're going to assess the board. So let's talk about some dashboards. This is how you should be looking at the school itself. So dashboards are really good at measuring trends. You want to look at trends over time, which I would call trend analysis. You want to look at comparison schools, so that'd be comparative analysis. So if you're a large school looking at other large schools, a small school, other small schools. You want to focus always, as best you can, and board members, on the big picture. So the comparative trends, what's everybody else looking like, and the internal trend, the trend analysis, what are you looking like? Look at it, is it fiduciary, is it strategic, is it generative? And then these should be regularly reviewed. And the key here is, as a board, you should know, is this a trend or is this a blip? If it's a trend, you really want to make sure you're dealing with this. If it's a blip, you don't want to overreact. And sometimes we think it's a trend and it's a blip and we overreact to that. That's a bad situation. Sometimes it is a trend and it's not a blip and we underreact. So getting that right is really important. So financial dashboards are your audited income and expense trends, the comparative, as well as a trend within the school. The fee and tuition trends, again, comparative, as well as within the school. The salary trends, always important. The financial assistance trends, and the annual giving trends. Now, I like annual giving trends because these are leading indicators. So these are really good trends to pay attention to because they often are a proxy for how people are kind of feeling about the school and feeling about themselves. So this is a good one. So the question that you should go back out of this meeting from is, what financial dashboards do you as a board have in place to assess your financial health of your school? What are you looking at? And I'm not going to give you the answer to that, but these are just some that some schools use. These are very good ones. Some non-monetary dashboards are student admissions data. So is somebody paying attention to that on the board level? Student attrition data, again, another indicator of what's happening within your current community. Staff and faculty attrition, what does that look like? College placement, I call that for the K-8s, the delayed satisfaction syndrome. The K-12s definitely look at college placement. So a practical suggestion I'll give you here is you should assign a board and management ad hoc committee to develop these dashboards. Which ones do you want to look at? And that should always be looked at and then you should keep it over time. I'll show you one over time. This is an attrition one. This is a little hard to see, but I think you can catch the trend lines here. So this is looking at student attrition. This was a 19-year analysis that this school had done. And you can see that they had made a major change in 96, 97. And you can see the line there, and you can see the average attrition was about 13 students. They did something structural in 96, 97, and then the average attrition actually dropped to 10 students. That's a really nice trend. But you can also see the idea of blips and trends. So there's a blip in 92, there's a blip in 95, there's a blip in 99, there's a blip in 2000. So these are important to be paying attention to, and the more data you have over time, the better it is to understand, is it a blip or is it a trend? And when you make a major structural change, maybe you change the administrative structure, maybe you change the curriculum, then you can look at what's happened as a result of that change. So measuring trends over time, we highly recommend that boards do this and somebody keeps track of this. This is a 19-year analysis. I assume that this school has kept it longer, and they might have a 20, 30 years analysis. Very valuable data. So assessing the board itself is really important, and we would suggest that you do a couple things when you assess yourselves as board. Assign this to a committee. Identify your strengths as a board. What are you doing well as a board? Prioritize that. What are your growth areas as a board? Prioritize that. And then who should be paying attention to this? So how does the school improve? You're looking at your longitudinal data. How do you improve as a board? You're looking at your self-assessments. And then we recommend for this one that you develop an implementation timeline. So we want to get better in a certain area. NYSAIS, and then you dedicate a little bit of board time to this one. This is an example, just a quick screenshot of the NYSAIS Board of Trustees self-assessment. This is a good tool. We provide it to our schools. It matches with our accreditation, and it matches with our governance best practices. So we would recommend that you do two areas of self-assessment. One is looking at the board as a group. The other area is looking at yourself as a board member. What are you doing as a board member, and how well are you performing as a board member? So I'm going to wrap up with just some resources for you, then we can do some Q&A if you'd like to. We have just a few minutes left. One is NYSAIS-Now, which is what this platform is. We have a lot of resources in NYSAIS-Now, and they're open to you. The other one, I'm going to have this list, and we'll get this out to you. This is a list of the books that I put on the original slide. Then there's Independent School Magazine by NAIS. There's ISM, and then NAIS, and then of course I do a lot of things on Twitter if you want to follow me on Twitter. So that's kind of a quick Trustee 101. What are some areas that I have missed or you'd like to expand on that you think are useful for your conversation? Comments, questions? Yeah, go on.
One of the things that would be useful to me as a kind of relative noob in the context of being a trustee is some kind of availability of data beyond what we have at our school. For example, faculty turnover or impact of compensation in related to turnover, or these sorts of things where there may be a number of different issues, but it's hard to understand what's actually important versus not, because there's no, at least I don't have a sense of norming against a larger body of data. What happens in private schools versus public schools in these contexts, those sorts of things.
So there are some resources out there for you. One is NAIS has a program called Dazzle. And so in Dazzle, a lot of that data is collected. And if you are a member of NYSAIS, which all of you are, then it is available to your school. All the New York data. If you're not a member of NAIS, you can't get the national data. In order to get the national data, your school needs to join NAIS. NYSAIS is not a subset of NAIS, so this is not our product, this is their product. But that does give you a lot of this information that you're asking about. And again, then take it into a spreadsheet of some sort and then make it yours. These are the pieces we really want to pay attention to. So we want to pay attention to attrition. We want to pay attention, the different pieces I talked about. So there is national data out there, and you can regionalize it too. So you're in the capital region, so you could look at what are some of the schools in the capital region, what are schools that are like Woodland Hill that you want to compare with. That would be your comparison schools. Okay, great question.
Oh, that Dazzle is something that's available online, or?
Yeah, so your head of school, your business manager at your school has access to the Dazzle data. So you as a board with the administration should determine what data do we want to pay attention to. We as an accrediting group also have things that we ask for as part of the accreditation process. We're in the process of actually kind of rethinking that, trying to make sure that lines up with what are really good governance practices too. But yes, Lisa, you can get that through your head of school and the business manager.